I'm joined by Lou Cooperhouse, President and CEO of BlueNalu. Thank you very much for joining me, Lou.
Hey, good day. How are you, Daniel? Pleasure to be on your show.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very well. It's like almost 2 months of self-isolation now. I'm starting to get used to working from home. Yeah, how about you?
Yeah, same here. I'm not used to working at home, but looking forward to going back in the office. But fortunately, we're able to just maintain our efficiency and getting the work done, but just in a different way.
That's what it's all about. I think it's important to be able to evolve and adapt as times change. And yeah, this is certainly an interesting time. And one way I love to start these kind of conversations is just to take a step back a little bit and start with the problem. More specifically, what is the problem that you saw, and what's the problem that you're ultimately at BlueNalu trying to solve?
That's a great question, Dan. A great way to get started. Maybe I could actually answer that in the context of my career a little bit too, in that I've worked in the food industry for 35 years, large companies, small businesses, startups, always doing new business development, always at the intersection of food trends and technology.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last 20 years, I've done a lot of consulting before BlueNalu, and also was the founder and executive director of this Rutgers Food Innovation Center, an incubator for startups. And frankly, I found myself doing a lot of public speaking about food trends, technologies, and was literally saw a total transformation that was happening under my eyes, and something as a front end of something I thought would be truly game changing, the most disruptive thing the food industry has ever witnessed. And it was alternative protein. And I initially saw that with plant-based, with a lot of activity in plant-based, with Apostle Foods and Beyond Meat, and some plant-based cheeses and dairy products.
Mm-hmm.
And that, being a lifelong food industry person, I obviously have a high value for what consumer attitudes are, and it always does come down to taste ultimately, as the experience and the people are willing to do many things for the planet and for their health, but taste is a huge criterion for repeat purchase. In fact, number one. That being said, so what I saw happening was, oh my God, you could actually manufacture plant-based cheeses that are really as good, and they melt, and they have all the same functionality as conventional cheese. That is enormous. And then I saw it with burgers, the same thing. So we've had plant-based burgers for decades,
Mm-hmm.
but really appealing, as you know, to more of a vegan, primarily community, vegetarian community. So what Apostle and Beyond did was kind of this new generation of actually manufacturing the same plant-based product, but one where you didn't feel like you were compromising on flavor, texture, and mouthfeel. And so then I learned about something, that was even more fabulous in my mind, which was cell-based. If you could actually manufacture meats without the meat and actually go full circle, that is a total game changer. And then to your question, I said, wow, that's an amazing technology. Where might it be most applicable? And the answer quickly came to me as I realized that the industry began on the mammalian side with land animals and beef and pork and chicken. I said, my God, in my opinion, the opportunity is clearly there, but it's really there. There, if you will, is a seafood, in that being a food industry person, it's all about where the greatest opportunity is, and also where the technology can be best adapted to solve that need. So back to your question, what's the problem? The problem was, or the opportunity really is that people love seafood. It's a global opportunity. There's a migration away from red meat towards fish. Doctors are recommending that. Obviously, has a lot of heart healthy omegas and a lot of benefits that people recognize.
Yeah, the Mediterranean diet.
Absolutely, and it's a staple, obviously, in many nations. And so, and the UN and many other NGOs are saying, well, it's only going to increase considerably. So as GDP increases, and particularly in Asia, where there's already a per capita consumption that's maybe 4 times the United States, for example, or even EU, what will happen? So obviously we have a problem. As demand is increasing, we have a supply that is really, really challenged. And so, what does that mean? So the supply is challenged because we have overfishing, illegal fishing. We're trawling the bottom of our oceans. We have fish nets and microplastics that are creating that are being absorbed into bodies of animals that we're consuming as humans.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's issues with mercury and environmental pollutants and toxins and pathogens and parasites that may in fact get absorbed into the body of the fish and the body of which we consume. And now, frankly, with this pandemic, there's more of a global awakening about our whole vulnerability of our supply chain. So if ever there's an opportunity, as demand increases and supply is increasingly challenged and variable and vulnerable, it's seafood. And as I found myself really talking about this and actually described it as a holy grail, of anything that food tech has ever seen, and the opportunity to actually manufacture seafood using the cell-based technology could clearly be really transformative. And the way that we're going to approach this, and we are approaching this, is to really, see this as a third solution to the supply chain. As you talk about sustainability, we're encouraging, embracing sustainability practices of wild caught and farm raised practices, but it's not enough. And the world needs a third solution of providing manufacturing seafood. And and the beauty of what we're doing is we are making a product that's nutritionally, functionally, and from a taste perspective, the same as conventional seafood, but using this new technology. So no longer, talk about sustainability, no longer do we need to necessarily ship seafood maybe 7,000, 9,000 miles from Southeast Asia to New York City. By the way, with maybe 30 to 50% bycatch, and by the way, with maybe a 60% yield, because the head and the tail and the bones and the skin aren't used, we can make 100% yield of product from a factory maybe 100 miles away, and it's the same thing. And it creates stability, security, and of course, it ends the animal suffering issues that occur in very frequently in this industry, and gives consumers a new choice to have a product that has all the benefits of seafood, but without any of the negative consequences that might be associated with it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, you've mentioned a lot of issues there, both from an environmental standpoint as well as a human health standpoint and animal welfare. When I was doing the research, the thing that jumped out at me the most out of anything was that an estimated 1 to 3 trillion fishes are harvested commercially for food. That is so much. I mean, I can't even fathom what that actually means. I just know that it's a lot, a boatload. I mean, it's crazy.
It is crazy, and
No wonder we're overfishing.
Yeah, and frankly, in this whole field, Daniel, it's hard to get good data, because even the word harvesting is confusing, because there's an awful lot of what's not really thought about by many people around the world is the word bycatch. What does bycatch mean? Bycatch means that I'm out fishing for example, tuna, and I'm maybe dragging these large nets out there to catch in a territory that I might typically find tuna, but there's obviously a lot of other fish that mingle, and birds too, and all kinds of things are caught in these nets. And obviously we might have heard about turtles and dolphins and other things, other animals too. But that number, is estimated to be anywhere from 20 to 50% for every, for example, 3 or 4 fish we catch, maybe 1 or 2 of them are bycatch. Wow. And sometimes, and I think typically, they might be thrown back in the water and they don't necessarily survive. And given the effects of that whole process. So that's why, back to the number of the size of the whole harvest each year, is complicated, so they only have estimates, but is staggering and is frankly the #1 source of, animal lives that are go into, the consumption for humans in our diets.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, there's something very, very sad about that. It's different when you have if you're like fishing for your own food and you're catching one fish for dinner or even a couple for like a day or two. When you start thinking about all of that, it's heartbreaking. So the way you're solving it is through something called cellular aquaculture, and you mentioned this word cell-based. What exactly are we talking about?
Yeah, we actually prefer the term cell-based, but we use cell aquaculture to kind of describe it in a more generic way. But
Uh-huh.
cell-based is a I think frankly resonates because people have become familiar with plant-based,
I
meaning
see.
that it has the same experience as meat, but it's using plants. But in their case, it's more of an analog because it's not representing functionally and structurally and at the DNA level the meat that it is. So we are different than plant-based because we're in fact not just replicating, we are manufacturing, in our case, seafood directly from fish cells. So to answer your question, what we're doing and others in this industry are doing is truly amazing. We're literally taking a biopsy, a sample from an animal, whether it's a cow or a pig or a chicken, in our case, a species of fish, mahi, red snapper, yellowtail, tuna, and we're isolating either muscle cells or fat cells or connective tissue cells. And these are the cells that are typically found in the seafood you consume. So if you and I were out to dinner and we both ordered conventional seafood, we might say, oh, it's a really lean piece of fish, tastes really great. Or you might say, well, I like black cod, it's got a little more fatty flavor, more
Yeah.
mouthfeel. So what we're really sort of saying is there's more fat cells in one product and more muscle cells in the other. And so that's really what we're doing is we're actually um, uh, manufacturing a seafood product that is in fact the same in every characteristic as conventional seafood, but via cells that we extracted, and then what we do is we're growing them in really large volumes. So if you were to walk through our factory of the future, you would think you're in a microbrewery. So you would see large stainless steel tanks. We don't have beer in there or wine in there and yeast fermentation going on or something like that, but instead we have fish cells that are being bathed in nutrients and growing to larger and larger volumes. They're doubling, and they're making large volumes of these cells, and then we're actually forming these cells into a fillet. Crazy as
Wow.
it sounds, but we're actually able to simulate the same characteristics as seafood that you might consume. So we're making mahi, it's from mahi fish. We're making red snapper, it's from red snapper fish shells. So we're literally kind of uh, taking some of the same building blocks that are in the fish that we love and actually just growing them in large volumes and putting them back together again.
That's absolutely incredible. So I mean, when so the final product, because it sounds like there's a couple of steps in between, and we don't need to go into the technical details. So as far as the final product, I mean, could I like when it's ready, could I actually order like a tuna steak
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
have that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great question because what we're as we start this business, it's obviously nobody's ever done this before. It's very groundbreaking,
Right.
but our we're absolutely focused on just what you described, the fillet. It's where there's a lot of industry growth, a lot of industry interest, and it's something, frankly, that's um, arguably next to impossible to do at the plant-based level.
Right.
So as we're looking to make a difference and create a more sustainable global solution for seafood, we really want to focus not on like the patties or the ground products, but actually focus on what is frankly more difficult, the fillet.
Hmm.
So we can, in fact, how do people consume seafood today? Well, actually, it's really three primary ways if you look at holistically. One is we might cook it. So what does that mean? It might be batter bread and fried or pan fried. Whether it's fish and chips or whether it's just a pan fried fillet, or it might be grilled, very common in many fish, with some seasoning, or seared. It might be steamed or poached, and it might be prepared a lot of other ways in which it's heated. Secondly, it might be eaten, if you will, through a raw acidification step. So what I mean by that, so if I'm going to make a poke or kimchi or ceviche, so what I'm doing is I'm marinating that product in a like a vinaigrette type solution, if you will, or lime juice or whatever, but it's an acidified solution. That that has the effect of cooking the product, through this acid process. And the third way is we might just eat it raw if we're obviously at a sushi restaurant, for example. So what we've been able to accomplish, and to your point, is to actually last December we did our demonstration event. We believe was the first of its kind globally, where we were able to demonstrate a cell-based seafood product that functioned the same as conventional seafood, in all those three characteristics. We did various methods of heating, used various recipes for acidification, and then we prepared it in the raw form, and it had the same structural integrity, the same cookability, the same characteristics in every way as conventional product. We actually, the test product we did was a species called yellowtail amberjack, commonly found on the West Coast, but certainly throughout the world. We're so excited, candidly, because we didn't know either. So we obviously did everything that we thought would work, and then when we heated it up and it smelled like fish cooking, oh my God, we've done it.
It's working.
It's working, and so obviously it's very gratifying.
Oh man, that must have been so exciting.
Huge milestone, and now where we're at is to really continually evolve our process and our technology so we can get to larger and larger scale and ultimately launch in commerce.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you have a chance to taste it after it was cooked?
Internally, we have tasted it. It's not appropriate for us to do a public event, given that the product needs to go through the appropriate FDA regulatory pathways. But internally, on the development side, yes, we have tasted it and tried it and measured it and analyzed it in every possible way.
Looks like fish, smells like fish, tastes like fish.
Under the microscope, it is fish.
It's incredible.
It's exciting.
So I mean, off the back of what you just said, and I asked Paul Shapiro about this about 5 times on when I spoke with him, and I think it's worth asking anyway, just because people think about this. Is it really fish? Like, is it fish?
Fish. No, and it's not an analogy that I really love, but this technology was at one point early on. It's not a very attractive term, but it was called in vitro. Okay. So the argument is, just like human beings can be born outside the body in a different way, they're still humans. We all love them, but same thing. So we're just applying a finished product, in that case a human, in this case a seafood portion, not a living animal, but just a fillet that was prepared a different way. And frankly, food technology is used. People don't think about how hot dogs are prepared or processed cheese, and certainly even a lot of plant-based products might have a lot of highly processed ingredients in there. People are just looking for the benefits that they seek, and we all have different benefits in mind. So this is really, if you kind of even think about beer or wine, it's if you kind of get into the weeds or kombucha, it's a little different. And yogurt for that matter. So I think there's just the processes by which we produce foods are unknown to many people. This too, is different, but it too shall pass. It'll become, it's cell-based. In fact, what we're offering, in fact, is benefits. It's the same conventional seafood product, but without concerns for mercury or microplastics or toxins. So we feel this is, as we describe it, it's healthy for people, it's humane for sea life, and sustainable for our planet. So it's a trifecta. It's a triple win.
It's incredible. So this area, kind of broadly speaking, is called clean meat, right? Why is it called clean meat?
So we don't refer to it as clean meat, and actually that name was, we call it in vitro, and then the technology was called clean. We actually just like cell-based because it's more descriptive. It's more generic, if you will, because a clean meat to and I actually come from the meat industry, my background, and the food industry in general. So we don't want to imply that any other practices are unclean by saying something else is clean.
I see.
So cell-based is just a nice vanilla neutral term that nobody can be offended by. It's just a descriptive term. Similarly, we don't want to call it lab made. It's not made in a lab, it's made in a factory. So lab made is derogatory towards our industry. Everything came from a lab, whether it's cereal on your breakfast or whatever you might have for lunch or dinner. It all started in R&D in some lab in some food company, and I come from R&D. So by no means is it lab made. I feel very strongly that's a very derogatory term, and making people think that it's came from a petri dish. But it's actually, again, coming from equipment that you're familiar with, like stainless steel tanks in a microbrewery. So again, the term that we prefer is cell-based.
Okay, that makes sense. And I can imagine if we fast forward like 20 years or even more, like 50 years, when this is just the way it's done, no one's going to think twice. Everyone says plant-based without batting an eyelid. And no one, like you said, plant-based, I'm sure if you start reading the back of that package, I mean, there's so many things there that you've never encountered before. And cell-based is just going to be just a thing. And it's fine.
And I think, plant-based will also evolve, just like many products in the food industry have evolved. Sure. Because frankly, as kind of as you're implying there is, we've all become more desirous as consumers to have, clean labels instead of clean meat. Clean labels, meaning less ingredients that we know and recognize, that don't sound processed. So there's been a tremendous movement, again, coming from the food industry towards, eliminating, unnatural or highly processed, refined ingredients with ingredients that we're very familiar with. So, I think we're already starting to see that where plant-based, some of the ingredient statements were over 20 ingredients long, with a lot of words that, were more than 10 letters, are difficult to pronounce. So that too will change, just like we've seen it in other industries, and will become increasingly less complicated, simpler, and maybe consumers may not have the same sensory experiences that we get from these processed ingredients, but I think that they may decide to maybe give up on that in favor of cleaner ingredient statements, just to find that right balance. I think the plant-based folks did a great job getting started with products that did an awesome job at mimicking the same flavor. But maybe consumers will kind of adapt to not getting that 100% equivalent, but maybe 90% is okay with a ingredient statement that's a little bit more user friendly from their point of view.
Yeah, makes sense. So I mean, you mentioned mahi-mahi, you mentioned yellowtail. What kind of fish are you planning to make in the future?
Yeah, we're as a company, our initial focus has been on the broad category of finfish. So that's that could embrace everything from various types of tuna to red snapper, Chilean sea bass, etc. And what's really unique about the seafood industry is because it's imported around the world at great distances. With I may have mentioned, obviously it's shipping these long distances with the bycatch and the yield loss. So our whole objective is to manufacture seafoods that consumers demand. But we're also very conscious of displacing imports. There's no reason for us to compete with aquaculture programs that do very well, for example. So what's our first species to that example is mahi-mahi. It's a species that's difficult and is essentially impossible to farm raise. So it's not something that can be accomplished. And in the US, for example, we're importing 94% of our seafood. It's an issue around the world with the huge movement and the environmental footprint and the lack of sustainability, frankly, of the long distances that seafood is going. You have caught thousands of miles away coming over on containers, air freight, foam coolers, dry ice, blue ice, wasteful.
Yeah.
The concept of manufacturing, we're actually redefining local, making a product close to market. So back to your question, so we're really focusing on introducing a species that makes sense wherever we go to market. So as we launch in Southern California, a species that we all love out here is mahi-mahi. It's obviously has some roots in Hawaii as well. It obviously comes from places like Ecuador and Peru, imported into many parts of the world. But nonetheless, it's a species that's San Diego is known, for example, for fish tacos. That comes from grilled mahi-mahi, and so that's kind of our entry point. But what we're really doing is creating a library, if you will. So our factory of the future will be able to say, oh my God, some species went on the watch list, no longer available. Price volatility is extraordinary. Something happened. We could say, okay, let's turn off red snapper. Let's turn on tuna. So it's a total paradigm shift for creating a consistent, stable supply chain. Working out some of the volatility that exists today on that supply chain by actually manufacturing seafood that makes sense. But again, our focus is to displace imports. So it's a win-win in that matter too. So we're literally even creating jobs and building factories and not competing with successful aquaculture programs, but really complementing that supply chain with species that may be distressed, not available, or for other reasons.
It's incredible. I mean, yeah, turning on mahi-mahi, turning off red snapper. I mean, it's incredible. So, I mean, do you envision at some point in the future when you say you're scaling up production, is this going to be only in restaurants, or are you planning to just make it, you can go to any supermarket and, just buy some fish?
We definitely want to be in all channels. So retail, food service, direct, and even supplying other suppliers, essentially if somebody's making some amazing seafood bisques, for example, chowders, we could supply, our raw material to a soup manufacturer, for example. But our entry point is food service. It's how many products launch globally. It's also a way to get started with small volumes, frankly,
right?
Because retail requires large volumes, and in this brand new industry, we're all starting small, all of us, and we're literally we feel somewhere between a year to year and a half away from actually being in a small test market. So, we publicized that that's our goal in the latter half of 2021, that we'll launch in Southern California, from our Southern California facility, a small scale test market, perhaps a few hundred pounds per week, not too much, but that also requires us to have our FDA regulatory pathway, identified, and all the boxes checked, and I's dotted, T's crossed, etc. And we're actually have started that process of preparing the required information that will be needed for that process. So our goal is to kind of work in parallel to have the FDA pathway, identified and sorted out, and our manufacturing capacity in place to occur, simultaneously sometime in the latter half of 2021. So wow. Exciting stuff, and that'll be our next huge milestone is that small scale test.
That's amazing. I mean, that's so much sooner than I think a lot of people would expect. It's much sooner than I would imagine. In my mind, it's like 2025, 2030 is like when these kind of things would happen, I guess, far in the future. 2021, I mean, that's going to be so quick.
Well, we're actually both right, because we're only starting at a small scale, but you're right. It's 2025 to 2030 when some serious volumes will first start.
I see.
So I think our first line in the sand here is just to get through you know all the milestones required to launch into a test market.
Mm-hmm.
Huge endeavor in itself. It's not about making scale production. As a company, we're very focused on scale production. We have been from day one, but we also describe that process as kind of 5 distinct phases. Each phase is an evolution in engineering milestones, technical accomplishments, and scale of volume. So it's in terms of volume, each of our phases is roughly a 10 times increase in capacity. So our phase 5 is a facility that we think can do 10 to 20 million pounds of production per year. So back to your point about 2025, 2030. So we're seeing that first phase 5 facility, and perhaps several of them, launching during that latter half of this decade. So the first of which will hopefully happen towards the middle of the decade, 2025-ish, and then several more to follow, hopefully quickly thereafter. So that's the game changer. So now we're starting to see some real market penetration, and doing some large scale introduction of the product.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. Those are big dreams. I mean, I think you have to have big dreams to really, well, when we're dealing with 1 to 3 trillion fishes being caught every year, you have to have big dreams, and it's a big issue that requires big solutions. And I think this is the way that you're planning this out and working on it is the way forward. I mean, you just have to. There is no other way to reduce the amount of impact that we have on the oceans.
You're absolutely right. I mean, if it's been, we recognize from day one, we need to find a solution to feed the world.
Yeah.
This particular seafood, it is an absolute global problem that needs to be solved. It's a classic demand increasing, supply at best stable, but increasingly compromised and increasingly vulnerable, because land animals, if you think about it philosophically, they're on land. I could see them, I can count them, I could test them.
Yeah.
Sea animals are coming from typically the wild, but even in aquaculture, there's issues that occur by having the proximity. We talk about, distance, social distancing for humans at this point in time. There is not social distancing for sea animals in aquaculture. So they could, diseases could go from one to the other reasonably quickly versus what would occur in the wild. So in both situations, there are, opportunities for improvement that we see cell-based, being that solution for. And but yeah, we have to do something, and as you mentioned, it begins with a dream and, and a vision.
Yeah.
But then that leads to a strategy. And when we really, put together our strategy, it was one that we said, in order to accomplish this, we need to really look at holistically at how do we get there. And we said there's a significant accomplishments that need to happen on the biology side,
Mm-hmm.
significant on the engineering side, operations, process development, food safety, regulatory, and of course, consumer adoption and awareness and communication. So as a company, we focus on all those in parallel with a very lean team. Let's figure out how to get these cells to proliferate. Let's do this without genetic engineering. Let's do this across a wide array of species, both freshwater and saltwater,
Mm-hmm.
creating really a platform technology. So we're not focused on one fish, but really a supply chain solution. So your point is 1 to 3 trillion fish. Let's go after the fin fish. It makes up a huge component of that seafood supply. Obviously, crustaceans is right behind that.
Yeah.
But let's start off with and find some commonalities where they exist amongst different finfish species, and really go after this very aggressively, and also work on the regulatory side, work on the engineering side, think about what large scale production looks like. And the genesis of our company was really being very thoughtful about how do we do this from the get-go, focus on success based on scale, based on reducing costs as much as possible, and creating as many factories around the world as possible, as quickly as possible. So it's not only has a huge impact on sustainability, but it also has significant economic return as well.
Yeah.
So it's been we're excited by our growth, but there certainly is a pathway ahead of us.
Yeah, there's lots of work to be done. I mean, do you think that at some point in the future you could completely displace seafood as we currently know it? I mean, could there be a point where people are just like, you know what, the ocean is too polluted. I'm not into mercury and I don't like plastic. I just want to eat pure fish. And I mean, could there be a point where basically actually fishing becomes obsolete?
We don't necessarily see that at all, because obviously many communities around the world rely on fishing for their own economic viability, and many so I don't see it ever going away. I guess the question is really more about commercial fishing. So
Yeah, I suppose so.
if
Yeah.
you look at some of the projections, one data point from one study talks about between 2025 and 2040, this one study predicted a 41% annual growth rate for cell-based seafood from a baseline of 0, representing by the year 2040, just 2 decades from now, 20 years, 35% global market share of all protein. So this is the cell-based meats at the broad scale. So they're suggesting that if they're proposing, or predicting, I should say, that where today conventional conventional animal supply represents obviously your base of essentially 100% or 98%, whatever the number is of our total meat supply, protein supply, that will become unconventional by 2040 and represent just 40%. So 40% will be conventional meat, 35% will be cell-based, and 25% will be plant-based. So they're seeing a 60% displacement. So consumers will have 3 choices, in 2 decades. And some species might make the most sense coming from conventional sources, some from cell-based, some from plant-based. So to your point, where we can address where the greatest environmental concerns might be, or whatever the challenge might be against certain species, and but clearly consumers will have choice, which they've always desired.
Absolutely. One thought that occurred to me where there could be a really interesting opportunity is to create either I mean, you were saying this earlier, endangered fish or currently illegal fish. I mean, there are certain species that are illegal. I mean, one that came to mind is like whales. Some cultures absolutely value whale meat and whale fat. That could be a really interesting opportunity because you can have your cake and eat it too. You could have your whale and eat it too.
We could. We're also very conscious of not necessarily entering into a business sector and creating more market demand for something than currently exists. So we don't necessarily want to inadvertently threaten whales by creating more awareness around whale meat from cell-based, and some people might then start to consume it or try to consume it from today conventional sources. So so this whole industry requires a lot of thought, and to really focus on the species that really make the most sense, and have the greatest possible impact.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's a really good point. Certainly wouldn't want to road to good intentions, right? Lou, thank you so much for your time. I think the work you're doing is absolutely phenomenal. I would love to see what the world looks like in 10, 15, and 20 years from now. I'm sure the fish will be absolutely delicious. And I can't wait to test it out. And so when if anyone's interested in learning more about BlueNalu and wants to maybe get in touch, or if they want to just be updated, where can they learn more about you and hear more about everything?
No, thanks for asking, Daniel. Yeah, obviously, for your viewers, our website is www.bluenalu.com. That's BLUENALU, and certainly you'll see on our team page links to various team members. So feel free to reach out via LinkedIn if that's helpful. And also you'll see news section and press section with a lot of information about what we're doing. There's also a resource section on our website for more information about the category. So white papers help you understand a little better. So we're excited to partner with industry. So we're really eager as we grow to develop even more partnerships as we go to markets around the world.
Awesome. Well, Lou, thank you very much for your time, and hope you can get back to the office soon. And yeah, best of luck as you're on this journey. Hopefully you get that FDA certification easily, and it's a smooth process.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, give us a 5-star rating. And also, please subscribe, whether on your podcast app or on YouTube. And that way you can be the first to know about new episodes. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.